Oh, no, I got it here, but
Okay.
that.
Oh, yeah, I can help you.
Get it down.
Everybody's mic working?
Best.
Hello.
That's me.
Testing.
I think it's been so.
Mine is.
Computer.
Yep.
So
So you said the pool, the 3 o'clock pool party on the ship with 4,800 people. It was such a small pool. And literally people were in there like shoulder to shoulder, and I was watching and they weren't using the restroom. So I'm like, there is no way I'm going in there. I mean, they were in there all day.
yeah,
It was adults only. Come on, go to the bathroom. It was just, Jim and I were laughing so hard. Oh. We did go snorkeling with sea turtles though in St. Thomas. That was pretty cool.
Is that something that you can get on their shells and
No,
ride with them? Okay.
they were like, I guess they stay there till they're about 10 years old, eating the grass and that.
Mhm.
And then once they get to be even bigger, that's when they get out into the, is it called the jet stream in the water? I don't know, whatever the stream is. So we learned a lot about them.
Mm.
I have to wait till 9. Okay, so we need to let him. I can say it once I call the order, I'll explain. Randy, do you have Tom's comments?
I saw them.
I know I printed them. Watch pile I put them in. Yeah,
Say them all right now.
that's an idea. True, true. I'll find it, or at least find you now anyway. Okay, it's 9 o'clock, so I'm gonna call the meeting to order. Do we do pledge? Or we don't have to? Yes? No?
Why don't we?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Why not?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so right before we do the roll call, I just wanted to explain that there's been a little bit of confusion about how this type of meeting is supposed to operate. And we were under the impression that we could participate via Zoom, and just clarified that we cannot. So you'd have to be in person to actually interact and with us during this meeting, so I'm sorry, Tom. But that does mean that you can speak up at public comment and share your information. And I will also, I can share your email during that you shared with me if you'd like. So just let me know that during public comment, please.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
What's that?
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yes, apologies. So we'll do roll call.
Hiltonen,
Present.
Steelman,
Yes, here.
Revance,
Here,
is Heidi on?
No.
Melnick.
Yes.
Dean,
Yes. Tom, but
Galloway.
he's not here. Yeah, or well, yeah. Any meeting agendas that we want to adjust or add or? No? Vicky, Denise? No? Okay. Any declaration of conflicts of interest? For what's on the agenda here? Okay,
No.
I will open it to public comment. In hall? None from Ron?
None.
Okay, what about on Zoom? Okay, no public comment from Zoom, last call? Okay, I'm going to basically turn it over to Randy then, to go through our information. So were you gonna use the projector? Or
No, I actually did handouts, so
Okay.
it is, and we'll walk through it. There are two handouts that I distributed. One is just a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that was done at the planning commission meeting last Wednesday. Just for your reference, because we'll talk about it a little bit. And then at the last meeting, I was asked to try to put together the beginnings of a survey draft, and I did that, and we've got a copy of that in front of you as well. So let me just bring back up for background information. The township is beginning its process of updating its master plan, as we discussed. The planning commission several times, the importance of communication can't be understated. We have to reach out to the public in order to get their input on key issues. In my years of doing planning, I find more and more value to that. In the early years, you didn't do much public engagement, or if you did, it was kind of a token effort to have a meeting and say, what do you think? And then, you got what you got, you moved on and did your plan and put it up for public hearings and approved it. These days, though, you'll notice that any other local jurisdiction around Traverse City, for example, or others, they have a substantial amount of public engagement in their planning processes. They have a variety of different types of meetings, surveys, et cetera. There's just really a lot of variety in the approaches that you can take with citizen engagement. Often they begin with some kind of a survey. And in reviewing what's been done here in the past, there was, of course, a survey done in 2009 that was contracted out to a firm, and we did summarize the results. And it's kind of a brief summary. I didn't mean to suggest that it all reduces down to a few pages, but there's not good information in there. Unfortunately, it is 15 years old, and it doesn't really speak to perhaps some current issues. There are a lot of things, as Ron and I were talking earlier, there's a lot of things that are still relevant today and are still important in shaping our policy. So, do you want me to go back through the highlights of that presentation?
I personally don't need it, but if anybody wants to do that.
Okay, so it's just there for reference, we just went through the questions and. So the question, one of the central questions going forward is this survey from 2009 accurate to work from, or should there be a new survey done? And so then we can launch into questions that would be asked in a new survey. And so this committee was created largely weighted towards public, towards private residents to help us with that decision so that we can have a recommendation to the planning commission about how to proceed. So, obviously, a new survey would give us more current information. You can ask more relevant questions to today. There were things that we didn't have Airbnbs back in 2009 for the most part, maybe some, but they were pretty much under the radar. We didn't have alternative energy back then in terms of solar fields and so forth. There's a number of issues that weren't just going on the radar during that time. And plus we have new resident growth over the last 15 years, probably 200 new residents who were here in 2009. And so I just kind of open that question up to the first thing to talk about. What's your thoughts on this?
Is the question the relevancy of another survey at this time?
Well, I mean, I guess do we proceed with other community engagement efforts based on the 2009 survey or do we do a survey?
So I think you did a really great job of summing up. This is 15 years old and you pointed out a few things that have changed. We also had a international pandemic that had impact and has greatly changed what people are doing now with their lives. So I think a survey that addresses some of the issues that you even brought up here. Are we asking the right questions when we do this survey? So if we're going to do a survey, that we put together the questions that are really going to get the answers that will help in this readdressing master plan and everything that's going on with it.
And, can you move the microphone closer? You do speak quite quietly.
Sure.
Thank you.
I can, I'll read what Tom had emailed. He said 2009 was 14 years ago and Whitewater Township has had many changes. I definitely feel that those opinions are out of date and a new survey is needed. I agree with both him and Vicky, myself.
I like the development of the survey in 2009, and I thought some of the questions we could just use as a comparison of change in the last 14 years, and then add some additional ones that are more pertinent to what the issues are now. And if we could kind of go with that, like age group, you fall in that. I mean, those are basic questions. I'd like to add questions to this that I thought were maybe not quite, that could have been included even in this one, but that wasn't the thought of at the time. Do you want me to go into what I was kind of thinking, or do you want me just to wait till you move forward on your?
Well, maybe we can get a decision point on moving forward with the survey. That's where I think the recommendation should go. I did want to also got to make one point. There's sometimes I've done a number of these surveys in townships and villages throughout my career, and probably 15 or 20.
I'm sorry, Randy's mic is not working.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There
If
you
we'll
go.
talk.
Thank
That
you.
better?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I thought mine was working as well. I mean, that's loud to me.
I thought I heard it reverb, but I guess not. So I guess I wanted to, there's some general thoughts here. I want people to realize that a survey like this isn't necessarily always statistically valid, in the sense that it's not a random survey, and the purists that do this kind of work for a living will tell you that a survey is not statistically valid until it's a random selection of residents. And so I can tell you in some other places where we've actually contracted this work out to a firm at the cost of about $30,000. The opportunities were provided for people to do online surveys or written surveys, but then there was also a random survey done with phone interviews to actually get to that random number, that random selection. I don't want to bore you with statistical stuff, and I don't really know it that well myself, but I'm always reminded that you can't over rely on surveys of this type because it's possible that strong opinions bubble to the top in this kind of stuff where some people are less inclined to respond to surveys no matter what mechanism we choose. So that's why you don't just rely on a survey as your citizen engagement effort. You don't always focus just on a written survey. You would do oftentimes additional meetings, workshops, things of that nature to supplement the conversation or the information you get from a survey. So I just want to throw that caveat in there so we don't over rely on the survey. It's a good way. The one thing that's positive about it is that everyone gets to answer. You know, you don't, if you do a random survey with phone interviews, you know, people say, why didn't I get called? You know, I have my opinion stuck better too. So anyway,
I think that was clear in the results maybe of, you know, there was predominantly male who replied, prominently an older age group that replied. So I think that came out clear that you only got a specific sampling in
Mhm.
this survey that we did. So are there ways to encourage more involvement with the survey?
well, with advertisement of it, you know, and we haven't even talked about the mechanism that we would propose to do a new survey with, but the advantage to this is that everyone gets a chance to weigh in. The other disadvantage is that if it's just put as a link on the website, then you don't even know that they're a township resident. So there's flaws in that process. What they did before apparently was to mail it to people. So that was a safeguard against people getting on this. I mean, if you put it on your website and, you know, it could be somebody from Kalkaska responding and not knowing where the township boundary is or something. I don't, you know, lots of possibilities for things to go sideways on that. So I just want to point out that, you know, the surveys of this nature are helpful. They're a good baseline, but it's not where we should stop in my mind.
I would support the idea of proceeding with a survey. Your comments regarding surveys, just in the last week, I think I've had 4 or 5 surveys issued to me from, did I enjoy my flights to Phoenix? Did I enjoy my experience with my doctor's visit? I mean, many of us are tired of surveys in the sense that there's an overload, but I think the people in Whitewater Township deserve a chance to provide the input. And I was a member of the township, a resident of the township when this survey came out. And it was fairly early after I moved up here, and I was quite surprised how complete this survey was. And I was excited with the questions that were asked. Somewhere along the way, I think we lost the momentum. And part of that, I think, is in retrospect, is we didn't have the community engagement. And I think that is a very important part, that what we do needs to be reprocessed back to those who shared this information with us. So all of those components are great. The other piece that I feel very strongly about is that as Whitewater Township engages in this process, there are other townships who are doing the same thing or recently completed their surveys, and some are ahead of us, some are not. But the challenges and the changes that they're looking at will impact us if we don't look at the greater Grand Traverse County, Kalkaska County, Elk Rapids, all of those. There's change going on around us, and we can't just look at our own local community. And I don't know how you extend a survey into our neighbors. So there's challenges here, but I think everything we do to gather information, gather people's thoughts, is the right way to begin.
So do we
Yep.
need to take like a consensus or vote or anything to recommend that we proceed with the survey?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Do we have to do a motion? Just consensus is
Yeah,
fine, so. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, for me too.
So the thinking of the committee is that we need a new survey of some mechanism to update what was done in 2009, that the data is old and there are issues that don't appear in the survey before that could be added to new questions.
And I guess I would defer to you, Randy, with the expertise that you've had in other areas and what you've already seen as the shortcomings and maybe some of the solutions. I don't know if we're in a position to say $30,000 for a survey for phone calls and all of that, but maybe there's some other things we can look at that would, this is the baseline foundation and we build upon this.
Yeah, that's really what's the attachment was. There was a start on this. And again, hopefully this is a collaborative process here that you ask that first group of questions primarily because we can stratify the results. In other words, we can say, you know, what do full-time residents think versus part-time residents, or what do older folks think versus younger folks, you know, or what do people in the north part of the township think versus the south part? And so that's really the reason for asking that first group of questions. You can go,
Could I add something to this? I mean, if you live north of or south of M72, I'd like another question, west or east of Williamsburg, Elk Lake Road, onto that as well. The differences in east and west is significant on the north side. You got the lakefront primarily east, the waterfront, and then west is more of Elk Lake Road is agricultural. South, I personally am not as knowledgeable because I don't go south very often. There's nothing for me to go south for. But I think east and west of
Mhm.
would be a nice addition to that.
that does put people in the quadrants then of the township that you would.
Yeah.
Maybe we could change that to one question and a quadrant kind of question. You live in that way. We ask the same information, but don't ask another question.
If you put it in one, they're going to start to try and do a picture in their mind, and some people are not visual,
That's true. Yeah.
and
Right.
they'll just do one part of it anyway. So it would be better to be two.
Regarding question 2, if I could read what Tom had submitted. It said the 2009 survey was directed at residents and property owners, yet there was some criticism on public comment that renters were included. The renters do not directly pay property taxes. They reside in the community, and we should consider whether they be included. We should also consider reaching out to businesses, non-English speakers, schools, local realtors, churches within Whitewater Township to give them an opportunity to weigh in. So I thought that kind of fit with number 2.
Mhm.
So what is everybody's thoughts on those comments?
Great input, great comments.
Mm.
Yeah, I think those are all things that we need to evaluate because, they are a key part of our infrastructure today. And, missing them, I think, would be a big mistake.
It's a long list. I mean, so all of them, or are there separate surveys for schools, realtors, churches, or is it the same questionnaire? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there for consideration.
It seems like there would be categories as you identify yourself. We have age and we have whether you're a seasonal or year-round resident. If you're a business, if you're a renter, those, we can then aggregate the data upward to that category.
I see. So just add them under number 2 is to identify where.
Additional categories.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm gonna write down, add businesses, schools, local realtors, churches. And then we would need, for non-English speakers, we would need a version in different languages. Translated versions of our survey.
Are you thinking possibly migrant farm workers then, including them in this survey?
Well, I don't know. What are you thinking? I guess I think, I don't know if there are I'm imagining there's non-English speaking people that
No,
live
just-
here that aren't migrant. but
I mean, just migrant farm workers in general, they speak English, but are they going to be included in this survey?
I don't know.
Because there is that population as well, and they
Yeah.
use services, or they
Mhm.
might need school services, or you know. And I believe MDR does have a subcommittee on migrant farm workers. And they interview them and for what their needs are, and most of them want access to the internet, just like everybody else. So, I mean,
Well, I think part of that has to do with how the survey would be ultimately distributed
Mhm.
and
mhm.
whether, and we haven't got to the mechanics of this survey yet, whether it is mailed, if it's mailed, then to who, if it goes in the newsletter, then what's the mailing list for the newsletter? I don't know that. So maybe some of those questions need to be fleshed out further once we decide on our mechanism for this.
Yeah, I agree. That's a mechanism issue for us to consider in the future.
One of the thoughts I had on that was in the community newsletter, if we're still going to be doing that, to make a comment, have a comment made that the community survey will be going out, and that a random survey confirmation will be done by someone who may or may not come to your home, because we don't have phone numbers, but we could mail them a card in the mail saying someone will be coming in and interviewing you for the community survey for the validity of the survey. That lets them know somebody's coming. It's, not somebody really strange, but when the census work, they're doing like every 7th house or every 20th house, and they do that validation that way.
Are you envisioning this being a personal visit?
On the mechanics of it would be possibly that we would mail out the survey to everyone, but indicate on through the addresses, put a note in maybe with one of them saying that to validate the survey, someone will come to your home and ask you if you completed the survey, and if not, we'll complete it with you at the time, so that the community survey will be more accurately reflect the community. And it could be 1 in 10. I mean, if you've ever done any surveying, it's something like along those lines. But we can work on that after we go through the questions.
Yeah, well, I think one of the benchmarks we need to discuss would be 20% was the response rate in 2009. What would be acceptable to us in terms of pushing the number to a higher response level? And at what point would we say we feel as if we've collected enough information to run with? And my experience with surveys and such is it's always an underwhelming number that you end up with. So, I would hope that as a group, we establish what that target could be or should be and filter that into our plans as to how far we run with a survey, because that could be exhausting. Just a thought.
I've seen the results all over, you can get, but again, it's, I think we have to think of this as our first step in the public engagement process, and not necessarily that the whole master plan is wrapped around the results of this, because at the end of the day, you're asking one question and you're getting one answer. It's not really, there's no dialogue, there's no learning going on, there's no exchange of ideas and information, which you get when you're having public workshops. So this is sort of our baseline level of information that we're hoping to get. So I just want to keep an eye on the long game here for how we hope to get public engagement in this.
Is there typically a percentage of responses that are, say, considered acceptable? Like if you got 2%, well, that's not enough. I can
Right.
clearly see that, but
Right.
is 20% that magic number, or do we need to determine what our magic number is?
I don't know that there's a magic number. I've seen anywhere from 20 to 50% in a lot of places. Sometimes where people are really hyper engaged, you get more, but when you hear 20%, you're getting 2 out of, every 10 residents to give you their opinions. So, and again, you're getting the people that are more inclined to respond to surveys. You're not really getting, the opinion of the average resident who sees a survey like you just did with your, flight to Phoenix, and you may or may not, if you're ambivalent about that trip, you may not want to respond, but if you had strong opinions, you would more likely. So that's how the randomness kind of gets skewed because it's only the people with like, I need to tell the township this or that, and those are the ones who are going to more likely respond to a survey. The people that are generally satisfied and generally, okay, I'm not as, I work, I have my family, I'm not as engaged in community issues as others are, so I don't respond to the survey. That's just reality,
Yeah.
So do you want to continue through this draft here? And again, this is just, rather than looking at a blank piece of paper, it's sometimes better to look at something with some questions on it, and you can say, yeah, this is great, or no, it's not. Let's beg that question. So on question 4, there's just a second group, 4 and 5, really our general views on growth and development. And this is kind of to get the temperature of the residents in terms of how they feel about what's happened. And so the question 4 is, on a scale of 1 to 5, do you think Whitewater Township has been changing for better or worse in the last 10 years in terms of development? So then they can answer 1 to 5. And then the more important thing is, why do you feel the way you do? Is it the quality of new development? Is it too much? Is it not enough? And again, as we go through this, it's important to pay attention to not having a bias in the questions, and it's, you can't help but have some bias in your own mind, but hopefully we can collectively weed that out and not have a leading question. So the idea is to try to get as many options in here that people could explain, and always have the other options so people can indicate something. So is that a good question, do you think? Is that going to get people, or is that helpful to us in the master plan?
I like the scale of changing for the better or worse. In looking at sharing your thoughts, 4 of them have to do with development and the other is traffic. So maybe we can also talk about what are other things that might be a concern, or that would have an impact on whether you think it's better or worse. I know we're speaking specifically of development, but there are other parts and impacts that development has. So I'm not sure that I have the answer to what I'm saying right now, but something to be thinking about.
I was thinking the same thing as you, that maybe more options.
Yeah.
To add there, or maybe. Is this one of those things we talked about last time where we need to define development? Like we need them to define, or
Yeah.
people to define rural? Because when I look out my back window, my rural might be different than your rural and your
Yeah.
rural. Is
Mhm.
that also similar with development, or is that just a basic term and everybody is on the same page with that one?
Well, we dig into that in question number 6
Okay, I
Yeah.
have.
about
Yeah.
what rural is. Um,
I think there's an opportunity for a question about existing infrastructure. In 2009, people were commenting about road maintenance or lack
Mhm.
thereof, or funding and such. So that obviously is something that we have to pay attention to. The second would be utilities infrastructure, which would be, public water, public sewer. I think that was somewhat exempt in the questions, but it's time to ask that question again. Is that something this township needs to focus on? So there's the capital side, capital improvements.
Mhm.
What do we feel we need if we are going to grow in certain dimensions? And I think that's a new set of questions.
Yeah.
Mhm.
mhm.
I was just going to say, development has to be defined, and then or have them say what development they're thinking of. And then the quality, is, do you want to have them rank it 1 through 5 again? Thinking that maybe that some of in question 4, like is it something that, you could have them rank like 1 through 5, and the type of question, because again, they might think, yes, we've had new development, but the quality of it is really only 2. And, do you want something like that in that question?
No, so it's intended to be a box that would be checked. It's letters, but that's just.
Oh, okay.
That-
So
that's just-
they can check more than one.
Well, we can limit that choice.
So I understand this is a draft, so
Right.
I'm trying to figure out where
Right.
it's going.
So the idea is that all the letters are actually boxes. That's probably can do that later, but.
Okay.
I mean, if we were to look at the heading, general views on growth and development, I mean, that's really what your expectation is. You have rural character and agricultural coming up, and then to Rod's point, infrastructure, road, all of that. So, we're heading definitely in the right direction. I greatly appreciate the work you've put into this, and I think it's a great way to gauge that initial thought. But you're absolutely right. It's going to be that next step of getting more communication.
Mhm.
No matter what we do, how well we think we develop it, there's going to be something that could be construed or read the wrong way.
So that's a good point, to keep the focus on this. We have to keep telling ourselves, I have to keep telling myself that this is the base. This is
Right.
not the
Yeah.
end all. So the
Mm.
details, and we could
Yeah.
go
Right.
400 pages on a survey and it's not going to matter.
Right,
So
and then people
keeping-
get fatigued and fill a
Right.
survey
Yeah.
out, and they don't, so it's a need to keep it. So I guess the idea is if people overwhelmingly said, hey, the quality of new development is worse, then, okay, well, what does that really mean? So then that maybe becomes a topic at the workshop that we explore that further. What do we mean by that? What could be enhanced or changed or too much development? Well, what's too much? And let's explore that more. And that's where, this just gives us the opening the door to these issues, and it's kind of letting the citizens guide this process, because they're going to be the ones that are telling us that this is an issue, this is an issue, this isn't. And so then it bubbles to the top. The other thing I'd mentioned about the infrastructure is the roads. We really you know, of course, the road commission is in charge of the roads, and so the township has some responsibility and can do certain things with roads, but by and large, it's the road commission that's doing the improvements on the roads in terms of maintenance and so forth. So, you know, when we saw in the earlier 2009 question, they were talking about services, and there are a lot of things that the township doesn't control in terms of services that they're provided by the county or and, you know, another entity or like schools. I mean, it doesn't having the township or the township trustees or board responding to school questions is difficult. Obviously, it's not in their purview.
I think that's a great point. There's a lot of citizenry that do not understand that division of, you know, county road maintenance versus township versus state. The schools, the same thing, that in these public engagements, we need to be able to explain what, so I think those are good leading questions because we'll be educating the population.
It's murky for sure. You hear
Oh,
the township talk
yeah.
about, you know, private road ordinance or road maintenance or special improvement district or something like that. And it relates to roads, but it's, you know, it's not a clear thing.
So I think if I'm hearing the group, we don't need to define development in this particular stage. We would do that at work groups. So other than maybe adding more options, and if so, what? We would not ask the question similar to number 6 to have them define what development means to them. Is that correct? Okay. So anything you would want to add as your list on number 4?
I guess maybe the fact that there's an other and they can explain would cover anything that's missing.
I think so too. I think after keeping it simpler and going back to reminding myself that this is just the
Right.
baseline, this is just getting a temperature, that I think it's fine and it stands alone myself, but
And I'm the one that brought this up. So I will say this, now that I go back and look at this, looking at the question groups, if we really highlight that, we've said that's what we're talking about. What are your views on this? Before we get into the other areas. So keep it simple. I'll leave the other S off.
So for context here, I'm thinking that we're not getting through this. We're not going to have a complete survey at the end of the meeting here. I think we're going to have more edits and another run at this. So
well, we have till 11, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
think if we
Yeah.
want to just keep plugging away, we'll get as much as we can done. So number 5, in terms of growth and development, please indicate an area where you think Whitewater Township should address to improve livability. Options are property maintenance, increased housing choices, increase retail options, address traffic congestion, increase employment opportunities, develop convenient bike trails and walking paths, other or none.
So when we talk about increasing housing choices, that would probably lead the planning commission and the township to look at what the zoning code allows, for example, in the various zoning districts, or in terms of retail, what does the zoning ordinance allow? So that's kind of the underpinning of those questions. Traffic congestion, we can probably do a little bit less about. Employment opportunities might involve industrial development. So that's the underpinning of these kind of questions.
So each of the questions pertain to a possible zoning ordinance, the way you have worded in like housing choices, retail, traffic congestion. It's all in going kind of flowing back to a zoning ordinance that we already have. Maybe we need to improve or.
Yes, in terms of potential changes to
Yeah.
the zoning ordinance, does the zoning ordinance limit housing choices? I mean, the township doesn't build housing, of course, but
but-
the township regulates land use, so that inadvertently influences what kind of housing choices we have in the township. So the township planning commission or the township board doesn't go out and build homes, obviously, but we can, but we do have an ordinance that directs and prohibits and allows different types of housing and different standards. So
Mhm.
answers to these questions would lead you to think, hey, let's look at that. What is,
D, address traffic congestion to me, because I've lived in different environments, that means like 100 cars, within a block. That's traffic congestion. Out here, I don't see. So I was wondering if maybe address intersections, dangerous intersections, because that's more what people I think around here would think about instead of congestion. Intersections like Broomhead Road.
Mhm.
And I would think, but it's not in our township, but Bates Road and 72 with the equestrian center in a trailer. But things like that. That's what I think of primarily in a rural community.
so you think it should be addressed traffic congestion / dangerous intersections?
Yes.
I'm okay with adding the / intersections, but I'm wondering if that's something that we're assuming that we would need to pull out in work groups after. Or if it's broad enough to put on the survey. Thoughts?
I guess the suggestion I would have here, we're asking what you would like to see improved. Would it make sense maybe they could offer a suggestion? I don't know, that might be a starting point to get some, rather than just going through and checking. People might have a suggestion of what that might look like.
Well,
Or we put it at the end of the survey, based upon your answers, what suggestions do you have? We're going to be putting together, groups.
Yep.
Maybe that's where we do it.
in 2009, there was a fair amount of concern for ambulance service. And they said fire department was good. And maybe there is a category called safety, where you also include intersections and,
Mhm.
law enforcement and services
Sure.
that may need to be enhanced or reconsidered.
Good point.
So you're suggesting a group of questions related to safety?
Well, safety and I remember some comments about Whitewater Township services. Are they adequate? That question needs to be asked again in a survey. As we expand, are there more services that the township residents want
Yeah.
from Whitewater Township?
Sure. So could be a group question.
That could be a group question.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah. So safety and administration, something like that, a new category.
So you would be thinking in terms of police and fire and
Police, fire, ambulance.
Yeah.
And then Whitewater Township Community Services. Things like senior centers and areas where we know that there are some answers. Those of us who've been around here, we don't have one in Whitewater Township, but there's one in Acme, I think. But it gets the conversation going with people when we get into the group sessions.
Mhm. Yeah, the educational component.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, in the old survey, there's actually a question about the following township services. So maybe that's something that we could include. that overall, fire protection, police, et cetera,
So take a question from there and pull it forward. Yeah.
maybe.
Okay.
And maybe in there you could even talk about intersections.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's really a service the township can provide, though.
Again, tangentially, the township can get involved in helping the road commission see the problem.
Right.
Okay.
That was some good suggestions.
Yep.
Are we comfortable with 5 then to move on to 6, or should we still pause there?
With the idea that we're adding another question, another group of questions about safety.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, 6, I'll read it for those on Zoom. The question group 3 is called rural character and agriculture. So that's your overall heading. And the question is, loss of rural character is sometimes mentioned as a concern when new development is proposed. However, the term rural character can be vague. Please indicate 3 of the following landscape elements that you most associate with rural character in Whitewater Township. The options are open fields, orchards and other agricultural land, woodlot and forests, natural stream and river corridors, dwellings on very large parcels, farm buildings and other types of rural architecture, rural roadways with limited development on either side, extended views of undeveloped land across the landscape, or other.
Communities have been trying to define rural character for a long time, and it's so the answers to this question could lead us to areas of concern in the northern part of the township, probably southern part too. In terms of future development, if there's areas to be preserved, if they're doing a planned unit development project, what elements of the landscape are most important to preserve, to try to protect rural character. There's probably a few other things we could maybe think of. I know in some cases like white fences, horse fences are sometimes a landscape element that speaks to rural character. You don't see that as much around here as you do further south. But with the horse thing we have going here, maybe that's.
The white fences are great, but they're expensive to install if they're low maintenance, and they're expensive to maintain if they're wood. So I don't know, but that's just my comment about these fences. Oh, I'm sorry. The fence question is they're expensive. I guess the bottom line is they're expensive, and most people that for this township, I don't see a lot of fences, white fences. I see a lot of agricultural fence or no fences. And some areas HOAs state that no fences are allowed in the whole subdivision. You can't, which makes it look more open. But this one, this particular question, I think is great if it correlates back to the quadrant question I had, because north of 72, the agricultural area is important to many of us, not just for the view, but for me, 3 would not be enough. I mean, I would want to put
All the above.
yeah. I might put all of the above, or, but yeah, but yeah. So I mean, I think the question is there's so many options that would have to be correlated back to the quadrant, and you could do that if you added that question.
As a person from south of M72, when I think of rural, I think of the state forest.
Mhm.
And when I get north of 72, I see the farms and I see that rural. What's unique is the roads that we travel. Williamsburg Road, Elk Lake Road. They're rural roads that are feature rich. And I think that's something we need to recognize in the township. And I don't know how you do that, but the roadways play a very key part of that enjoyment of rural. I don't know what you do with that, but you have to recognize that the roadways present
Yep.
opportunities as rural.
Yep, and that's the reason for question number
Yeah,
7.
yeah.
You
yeah.
know,
So my only thoughts on 6, though, were to use another word other than rural and the last couple options. It says farm buildings and other types of rural architecture, and then rural roadways with limited development on either side. So I think since we're having them define it, maybe we should try a different word instead of rural in the answer.
okay.
But I don't know what word. No solution there, just a suggestion.
Or you just take rural out.
Yeah, just take it
Yeah,
out.
maybe that's it.
Oh, okay, yeah. Works.
And I think the roadways with limited development on either side addresses, Rod, what you just spoke about.
Yes, yes.
Anything, should there be anything added for lakes? Or, I mean, we have rivers,
Mhm.
natural stream and river, but lake views, or I don't know. No?
Oh.
It's okay to disagree, or
No,
I'm just
that's-
throwing it
I
out there.
know, that's kind of how this works. It's not,
Yeah.
it just gotta,
I was actually thinking the same thing, and the more I thought about it, we have lake views everywhere, so.
Right.
Well, a lake, in my mind, it just throws back to what people consider rural and
Mhm.
Lakeview. I don't consider 100-foot wide waterfront rural. I'm sorry, that's like I can put my arms out and, touch the building next to me. And I had a friend who lived like that, and he went out in his yard, and the neighbor called him up and said, "What you doing?" He had his camera, his home camera, so he could see what the neighbors were doing on each side. I don't even know, that doesn't feel rural.
I agree. That's your definition of rural is different than others. So
Yep.
what I'm thinking is, should we be capturing, that we're able to capture those who maybe have moved here from the city and their
Mhm.
definition of rural is very
Yeah,
different than ours.
It is.
So
totally
that's
different.
doing that unbiased thing, I guess, and trying
Right.
to say, should we have other options that aren't the way we view it, I don't know. Something that might seem city to us is
Mhm.
rural to somebody else, So I don't know if we should add something, add more options in that kind of area or not.
The comment about waterways is interesting. I like fishing. I like stream fishing. And when I drive up and down the roads, I'm always kind of looking to see what's going on in the little streams and tributaries. They're hard to see. They're really hard to see on Williamsburg Road as an example. The one that probably bothers me the most is the one that goes right behind this property and crosses underneath M72. It's hidden. Maybe it belongs hidden, but it is, part of this scenery. And I believe we own some of the land, but there's venues of water that we don't really see every day when we commute. Is that something that should be questioned? I'm just an observer of water.
Are you thinking that's another choice in here that we could?
Well,
Add
it
to-
fits in riparian. And you've kind of hit that in your first question or two. But to me, that's part of rural also.
Well, we have natural stream and river corridors on page 2. Would we want to add something of lakefront or lakeview, or just add lake to that?
as a group?
Well, no, under the loss of rural
it's yours.
character, et cetera, it's the
Like,
definition.
yeah,
What are you
yeah.
defining?
Yeah,
Lake views.
lake views.
Mhm.
River views, stream views, yeah.
Mhm.
So is it views of natural stream and river corridors? Would that help?
Views and access.
And that's under 6 as a choice, rural character.
Yep. The last one, on bottom of page 2. Where it says natural stream and river corridors.
Views and access to natural stream and river corridors. Okay, good.
Good catch.
Which question was that? Number
Number 6.
6. Yeah, I put that, but was there something else?
Oh, the only other thing was with lakefront or lake
Lake
view.
view, yeah, lake, or you got that?
And put
Yeah.
that there as well.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna move on to 7. In your opinion, identify the most scenic views from a public road in all of Whitewater Township. Please be as specific as possible. That's a good question.
It is.
Yeah.
I have to think. I don't even know how I would answer.
I mean, is it Elk Lake
That's-
Road? Is it Supply Road? Is it?
So what's the end game with that question? What's the purpose of that question?
In some communities, they identify view sheds. They call it, that's the term, the planning jargon for that, is that you identify, you know, this area is a particularly attractive view of our community. You see, you know, a lot of area, perhaps you see a lake in the distance. And so development in that view shed, it perhaps gets additional scrutiny,
Great point.
you know,
Yeah.
and sort of like this is our prime view in the township. The residents told us this. So let's be extra sensitive to any development review in this area.
Very good question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, where you take that is,
Yeah.
again, is another
Well, that
another
led
issue,
me
but
to-
let's identify what's special about Whitewater.
That
Mhm.
led me to think of this is probably, I'm just gonna throw it out there well, so it doesn't leave my brain, but it seems like it would be pertinent to have a picture, a map with our township kind of, highlighted. Not the zoning map, but just highlighted of this is our area. So
Mhm.
people have a visual when they're taking this of these are our areas. Because right now I'm thinking, okay, but I like the view here, I like the view there, but I'm not really sure where the line is. So am I talking about Acme or am I talking about Whitewater? So that-
Depending on how we do this, we could put a map in here and have them identify, mark a spot.
Then you get into length of forms and then people start going, oh, 5 pages, I'm done. I'm not even gonna
Yeah.
start. If they put in the specific location, then we can develop a map from that maybe when we do.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The workshops.
Yeah, I was just thinking maybe the cover sheet that it's explaining, this is a survey and what it's for and why and when it's due, that kind of thing. You would just have a picture.
I agree.
Just so that you can mentally visualize where we're talking about. Because if I don't travel to Elk Rapids very often, I might not know how far we go up on,
Right.
which directions we go. It's not a
Yeah,
perfect
for sure.
shape.
Some people don't know the boundaries of the township. I mean,
Mhm. Yes.
So that was just my sidebar suggestion. I'm gonna move on to 8 if we're good with 7. Number 8 says much of the land north of M72 is zoned agricultural in Whitewater Township. The minimum required lot size in the agricultural zoning district is 1 acre. In your mind, is the 1 acre minimum lot size appropriate? Yes, no, or not sure?
I think this question hits a lot of aspects of rural. And I tend to see it personally as a leading question. It brings back to me 1 acre versus 2.5 versus 5 acres. And I'm always concerned when I see a question like that.
Yep, and we do not want to be leading in any way in this. We want an honest, and so, in fact, an earlier version of that had some description of other townships do this or whatever. I mean, I don't, we want to just,
Keep it yes and no, no gray. To me,
it's an important question, but
yes,
Yes.
it's an important one, and then it's yes, no, not sure, done. Yeah, people have viewpoints on it. They, for various reasons that may not be the same as someone else's. Again, you can tie that back to the quadrant. People in the in the large farm area will think differently about this than people down in the southern part, which I have no idea. I'm sorry about what south of 72 is thinking. So it's a question, and the regulations apply to the whole township. So it gives you an idea of what people are thinking and what section they're coming, they're in.
so you mentioned this, you thought that question was leading. Is there a way to make it unleading so it's not? Can you think of a way to rephrase something?
I probably can, but right now it just isn't jumping out at me. When I think of it, agriculture is obviously a very big part of the zoning districts. And then there's recreational agriculture and so on. So I don't know how to deal with that. But I think the question probably needs a little more consideration as to what do we want to accomplish, because I can see people reacting to that one really quickly and really precisely. And, you just kind of, I don't know, maybe you've split people into different camps with that question.
I'll say my gut reaction when I read it was, oof, like, I don't even know why. I can't explain it, but I was like, oh, that's, maybe just because it is a hot topic, but probably all the more reason that we need to identify it.
Mhm.
Yeah. And maybe because we are more involved, we have an opinion formed already, and other people may not. They may just think, I don't know, 1 acre, that seems about right. It's agriculture. Because if you're a farmer, and land is the most important thing to a farmer, I can't, this is something that they might respond to differently than someone who came from the city and had a lot. They would think, wow, a whole acre. Oh my gosh, that's like thrilling. But a rural community like I consider Whitewater Township, 1 acre really isn't anything. That's the small size of a subdivision, I guess.
Mhm.
But that's just me. The other thing I was going to comment about is 1 acre. Some people just don't have a general idea of how much land 1 acre is. If you put the dimensions of 200 feet by 200 feet, or, that's, or, because in your mind, if you don't know what an acre is, you don't know what an acre is. And
You think that'd be helpful to say
Yeah.
just like 220 by 220 somewhere roughly?
yeah,
I think that would be helpful.
yeah, because
Gives them
people
more
just
visual.
have no idea. And I do have a bias on this. I really treasure land. So for me, I'll have.
And there are two schools of thought on that. If you require 5 acres and you're chewing up 4 additional acres, that goes out of production, becomes grass and somebody's yard.
Yeah, unless you do there are farm techniques that you can do on 5 acres, but and what type of farming you do, like mushroom farming, it doesn't require a lot of land, that kind of thing, or herbs or something. But yeah. And so what people are thinking isn't necessarily what we're thinking. That's all.
I think it's an important question.
Mhm.
It is. It's one of those, I think we want as much feedback as we can get.
Yes,
So how do we word the question? So the people who think large is good and people who think small is good. Because at some point, we have to take that data and put it into our plan. You know,
Right.
it has to eventually make its way into zoning and such, but I'd rather have the discussion while people are in meetings that, okay, here's the general consensus. We've got 5% of our surveys who say 10 acres is minimum. And then, you know, just something that facilitates that discussion, I think is what we really need. Because it will be there forever and ever and ever. It
And
has already.
maybe that's what where we're missing it here is that appropriate? And if you answer no, what is appropriate? Maybe that's the next question.
So my first thoughts right now on it are by breaking it out by quadrant, I think, and being able to analyze the data based on which quadrant the answer came from, I think is going to tell us the most right there. But you could add that, or would that be better suited in a work group where
Right.
you can get their
Right.
discussion and everybody can share their side kind of thing, a debate, if you will, I guess. Um,
And I guess, kind of referring to that, we haven't gotten to question 9. Does that cover do you think agricultural lands and farms are important in Whitewater Township? Does number 9 reflect that? I know we're still on. Are we done with 8?
Well, I was going to recommend that maybe we pause on 8 for a minute, kind of digest it. We definitely want to come back to it, I think, to make sure it's not leading and we're not being biased with it. But why don't we move on and see if something doesn't help clarify it or come to us? Is that okay?
Sure.
All right, so I'm going to read 9, so those on Zoom know what it says. It says, I wish I had my glasses. Agricultural tourism is a broad category of activities that can include roadside stands, U-pick operations, and other activities incidental to the operation of a farm that brings members of the public to the farm for educational, recreational, or retail purposes. To what degree are you supportive of more agricultural tourism activity in Whitewater Township? Very unsupportive, indifferent, supportive, or very supportive?
That's a great question.
Mhm.
That one just
Yep.
jumps out at me. And you have all of the choices right there that you could walk into a meeting and I think you get a lot of good discussion.
Yep, so the questions are like, so you want to have roadside stands, and then to what degree do they do value added to the agricultural products? You know, you can imagine baking pies, you know, that they do. And then if it goes farther into, well, let's have sandwiches too, and then pretty soon it's a restaurant, and then, you know, it's just
A winery and.
yes, all of that.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So that I like how you gave lots of options, you know, and explained what it is and what we're asking you to answer. But I can see how down the line that would be enlist more discussion and more information. Where does it end?
And there's a point to which it becomes a commercial operation,
Yeah.
and where's the line? So
A good start, though. We know where to kind of go with it if it even needs to be a priority, depending on the answers. Are we good with 9?
Yes.
All right. Question group 4. So the title of this group is Retail/Commercial Development. And the question is, portions of the M72 corridor through Whitewater Township is zoned commercial. Generally speaking, what primary qualities should future commercial developments have? Pick up to 2. Options are smaller building footprints, no big boxes. That was with that one. The next one is limited driveways and access roads, extensive landscaping, sign controls, meaning sign, illumination, etc. Rural themed building designs and related architectural elements, limited site lighting, mixture of uses, potentially retail, services, office, residential component, etc., or none of the above.
Or the next page goes on to others if
Oh.
there's somebody,
Oh,
could-
there's
I guess there
three.
should only be two if we're only getting
Yeah.
two choices.
Two others.
Yeah, two others.
You give me three, I'll take them. I'll take three.
I think my only comment on this one, it says smaller building footprints, no big boxes. So right off the bat, we're saying no big boxes. Maybe we do put in big box as a choice. I don't think
Oh,
anybody's going to
oh.
answer that way, but seems like we're leading that way. Smaller footprint, no big boxes.
Oh, okay. There's a bias in there, isn't that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
add
and then that's another kind of issue. You can have large buildings appear to be a group of smaller buildings.
Mhm.
You know, so the box itself is big,
Mhm.
but the outside facade and the appearance of it can look like a lot of smaller buildings.
Mhm.
So,
Like a strip mall, is that kind?
well, kind of, except that you can do it more creatively than a strip mall. You
Yeah.
can, there's some buildings that have been done there that appear like a downtown environment. You could think of that being, each building is a big box in the sense that there are different buildings, they're attached together. It's one building divided up into sections.
So are you saying we should add big box stores as a choice?
Maybe, I don't know.
I think you have to include all options. I
Mhm.
mean, I think you do. So you'd have one that's not and one that is as an
Right.
option.
Okay.
I mean, hopefully they're not gonna check not and is, is there two? I mean, that would be contradicting each other. And my only thought is on the one where it says rural themed building designs. I don't know if we can use something other than rural themed and other terms there, just to get away from the unidentified definition of rural, unless we tie it to their answer of that question, we wouldn't really know what they're thinking. But I
Yeah, that
don't,
would be an area to delve into further. I think when I think of rural themed, I think of like the Tractor Supply building. Looks like it belongs here. And in my mind, in my judgment, I guess it's, maybe others wouldn't say it does,
so
but
could you call it like agricultural themed? I don't know, I mean, because I guess I think of Tractor Supply as agriculture, like that's where I'm gonna go get my supplies for.
Mhm. That might be
Maybe.
better than rural, agriculturally themed. And that's really nebulous. I mean, that's,
Mhm.
but people might say, yeah, we should have commercial buildings that look along the lines of Tractor Supply or things like that, or the new veterinary clinic there looks like it has got a. And you have to be careful, of course, in that, you know, getting into design themes is tricky in planning and but. So change rural to agricultural, is that what I heard?
My suggestion, but I'm gonna defer to the group as a whole on that.
I don't know, agriculture to me kind of is a product. Agriculture themed building design, I mean, it doesn't go with the design. To me, it's, I don't know, barn dominiums come to mind. Farm, I don't know. Agriculture to me means products, and that may just be my own limitation.
I see what you're saying, Rachel, and we're asking for them to define rural. You know, is it themed building designs and related agricultural that fit the township? But I mean, I don't know how you go about saying that either.
Yeah, I don't know. Look up my thesaurus here,
Mm.
other words
Yeah.
for, I don't know.
If you strike the word rural and just go with themed building designs, does that get us to a more neutral point
For right now, I
for
think.
right now?
Mhm.
That would be more broad, I think,
Mhm.
because what I was thinking is like, do we need to, I'm thinking, very modern buildings,
Mhm.
right? Very industrial buildings, like it could be everybody has a different design. Design is a very sticky,
It is.
it's a can of worms because everybody's got a different idea of what's beautiful to them. But that would keep it broad, and if that was a hot answer, of course, in the work groups, we could draw out what that meant for them. So I like that, just removing the word rural,
Mhm.
leaving it vague.
Also in that question, should we be dealing with manufacturing? Or do we have a question within the survey that hits the development of future or expansion of manufacturing in the township?
No, I did not. I did, but that's a good point. And I remember thinking about that and talking about that, but
I mean, just maybe adding manufacturing facilities to this.
well, we have the manufacturing area, of course, and
Right.
and so maybe another group of questions that
Yeah.
just relates to manufacturing.
Yes. Industrial area,
Mhm.
an industrial zone. Maybe not.
Maybe something like what qualities of industrial development would you want to see and any changes to our industrial district?
So another question group.
District. That's the word. And I'm not certain, apartment buildings, would that fall under commercial development or housing? Because you have a residential component, mixture of uses.
So are you on to question 11 or are you?
On question 10.
Okay.
You have mixed uses,
Oh.
residential component. I'm just wondering if that is apartment buildings or is that retail on the bottom, residential on the top, because we've had that already come up in one building. I'm just wondering
Mhm.
where apartment buildings fall in.
Well, they come up in two places here and then also in question 11, but
Yeah. So is
The-
residential component mean apartment buildings?
it could be, or it could be a transitional type use from commercial to some kind of multifamily format to single family agricultural. Oftentimes,
Yeah.
multifamily is a good
Mhm.
transition from more heavy commercial to,
Could you put a multifamily in that as a mixture of use or just separate?
instead of residential component.
Yeah, because to me, mixture of uses means like retail on the bottom and apartments above it, like we already,
Mhm.
but also just an apartment building.
Well,
or
it can be
duplexes.
mixed vertically or horizontally.
Yeah, so multifamily housing.
But it wouldn't
Yeah.
have to be multi either, right? It could be one.
Correct.
So
What do you mean by one?
you could have, my business is down below and I live above, and it's not multifamily, it's just me.
Yeah, that's the mixed use, retail on the bottom and people live above it. But I'm just wondering for my own self, are we going to, I guess, allow apartments and duplexes or whatever in the commercial development? Or how, I'm not sure where we're addressing that in this group of questions.
So you're
Well, that-
wanting to address multifamily if that's allowed in commercial districts?
Along 72
So is that something that we draw deeper in workshops or?
Mhm.
I think so.
And not put it in here.
Well,
That's my
residential
thought.
component's fairly broad, so that
Right.
we don't really define what that is, and to define it would take more time and more space and.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to let somebody else read 11 for me.
I'll read
because
since I have-
can't even see it.
I'll read. I have my
Thank you.
glasses. Number 11, the village of Williamsburg, north of M72, was once a commercial center. While some evidence of this remains today, many buildings were demolished years ago. Today, we have a mix of public buildings, a cemetery, residential uses, and commercial uses. If redevelopment takes place in the years to come, which of the following scenarios would you most like to see? First choice, encourage redevelopment into a village-type setting with small-scale retail, commercial services, restaurants, and upper floor housing. Another is encourage higher density residential redevelopment, townhomes, or a format similar to Millbrook Estate south of M72, or something else, and there's an opportunity to explain.
I like that question.
I do too.
Just as it's written.
I'm really blown away by the history in that area there. If you can dig it into it a bit, and then it's just like the train station, all kinds of stuff that was there and it's all gone, but so, but then what it becomes in the future, and no one's talking about any specific initiatives, but if it's changes, what does it change to? And what should the township support and encourage based on what residents want? I mean, I think a kind of a village environment with
Mhm.
little shops would be very cool in there. And it's, you got access to 72, but you don't have the traffic. It's just,
Right.
And I want to see more playgrounds and senior centers and
Yeah.
and stuff for families and in that area myself. So I like the small, okay, we're not
Yeah.
talking about us.
That just, it's a good question
It
for
is.
starting,
Mhm.
starting the conversation.
Yes.
Because I think it's been ignored in most conversations because they don't, there's other things that we are discussing, but it needs to be addressed.
and then again, that really relates to the zoning. What does the zoning permit or doesn't permit? And if people want to see a village type environment and our zoning ordinance doesn't allow that, then it's something we need to work on.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So.
Okay. Well, we're good on that one.
Yes.
Who wants to read group 5, which is housing?
I'll go ahead.
Thank you.
Question for group 5 under housing, short-term rentals, i.e. Airbnb and VRBO of private residential homes occur in some communities, and this activity is particularly popular in northern Michigan. The term short-term rental typically means the rental of a dwelling unit for less than 30 consecutive days. Should short-term rentals be allowed in Whitewater Township? Note, state law may change how local government can regulate short-term rental in the future. The options are short-term rentals should be prohibited in Whitewater Township. Short-term rentals should be allowed in Whitewater Township without any local regulation. Next choice, Whitewater Township should regulate short-term rental activity in some fashion, i.e. licensing mechanism, limits for how many short-term rentals a property owner could operate, limits on how many short-term rentals can be approved in a community, etc. Or D, not sure.
Great question.
I like it as it is.
So the issue on the state law is there's been legislation pending for 5 years, I think. I don't know. So that could change the landscape in a heartbeat. They could take that, and what local governments can do.
But it doesn't mean that we can't have something until the state law is whatever it's going to be.
I think you have it covered quite well here.
Okay, it doesn't talk about how it's regulated now. It
Right.
just
Mhm.
just
It's great for discussion purposes.
Question group 6, alternative energy. Would somebody read that for me?
Large solar or wind facilities are not uncommon in Michigan. Neighboring Acme Township approved 50-acre solar farm off M72 a few years ago. Large solar or wind facilities produce large amounts of power delivered to the grid and do not include individual systems serving individual properties, i.e. solar panels on rooftops. While there are no current plans for an alternative energy facility in Whitewater Township, please share your thoughts about such a facility should it be proposed in the future. And the choices are, I support alternative energy and believe that the environmental benefits outweigh impacts on the appearance of local rural landscape. The next choice, I support, I think it's supposed to be I support,
yeah.
or I am supportive, one or the other, of alternative energy, but I also want to see careful planning and approval safeguards to minimize offsite impacts. The next choice, I am only supportive of alternative energy if all offsite impacts are fully addressed. And the last choice, I do not support alternative energy systems in a township like Whitewater.
It's kind of a hard one. I thought, but the ordinance doesn't address it. The master plan doesn't address it. It wasn't an issue in 2009 for the most part. But obviously Acme Township dealt with it. And those kind of facilities are somewhat driven by the location of substations as well. So the existing grid, I don't really know, but just in preparation for that coming up here, what's the attitude of residents?
Yeah.
And trying to separate out, we're not talking about the solar panels on roofs and for residential purposes that just reduce your energy consumption from consumers.
I received a letter from a company last fall asking if I wanted to have a solar farm. So they are companies that are interested in that. They identify areas of the township that would be a good site for a farm, a solar alternative energy farm. So I've already gotten a letter, so I know other people must have as well. So it's probably something that should be discussed and handled ahead of time so people have an idea of what their expectations should be.
Well, it being a green energy issue, I think it's a good discussion within the community is, what are we willing to accept? And the question does ask, general, how do you feel? Are you supportive or not? I think that's a great way to collect information. I like the question
I do too.
and the choices.
Me as well.
Job well done.
Mhm.
On the 2009 survey at the end, I guess there was I don't know exactly what the line was about public comments of what they thought maybe they had an interest or concern about. I was wondering if we could have that on this one as well. And I would just phrase it maybe a little bit different, something like, what have you seen outside our township that you would think would fit in with Whitewater Township's rural character? Because people travel around, they go, oh, that's really cool. I could see that. The other one is, just my general thoughts are, people don't understand that haven't been following it. They didn't know that at one time, developer was going to come in and put in 600 units in a parcel area, part commercial, part agriculture, apartment building with, the RV site on the back. A question that I would kind of like to add is if the township were to have a large development, a condo site development come in with 20 to 30 to 40 units, where or more, where would you like that to be situated? Would you, and because the last time it was around the township, do you want subdivisions all around the township, or do you want them create a higher density area so that you can maintain the rural character of the township. And, uh, and I guess one of the things we haven't addressed is, you know, and I guess that should be what zoning district should they be located in? And then with this, you've addressed it in the STRs. I had just some of my notes. Mine was, if there were apartment buildings built in the township, do you want them in the residential, commercial, or multi-residential area? Should there be a minimum acreage for residential, single-family dwellings in agricultural district? And you covered that, and I had more of an acreage, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 acres or more. I don't know if that's anything that I should probably have brought that up. And then for input, and this doesn't have anything to do with the survey, but for input, I'd like to have some of the high school students in this township as part of the work groups. So that's all my thoughts that I didn't bring up yet.
I apologize. I do need to be at my office, so I will have to leave, but thank you guys. I will try to be available for the entire meeting next time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I'm
So-
wondering if your question, if it's getting too deep when you list all of the, just because unless you provide a map of what those are, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know to say where I would want it because I don't know where it exists,
Are you talking about subdivisions or?
Well, when you listed where would you want subdivisions and you listed the different districts and areas?
I think people have a general idea if they would want them around 72 or Williamsburg, Elk Lake Road, the main arteries.
So maybe that's how you word the
Or-
question is based on landmarks or the quadrants or
yeah.
something like that versus the
Well, if you-
zoned districts or.
well, if you say, but that's limiting in itself, because if I just give that as some markers and old 72, that's kind of saying, choose one of these three, nothing else. So I don't know how to.
Is that something we could better draw out in workshops later?
Is that more of a
Maybe-
workshop?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. I think you raise an interesting point, although I would also note that the 1 acre minimum is often what the health department requires for well and septic systems. So if you're talking about anything less than that, you're talking about needing some kind of a treatment system or being hooked to a utility of some type, water and sewer.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother financial commitment that we don't have right now.
Should we circle back to that question we were hung up on? Which one was it?
Number 8.
Yes, number 8. So it said much of the land north of M72 is zoned agricultural in Whitewater Township. The minimum required lot size in the agricultural zoning district is 1 acre. In your mind, is the 1 acre minimum lot size appropriate? Yes, no, or not sure. And we talked about including dimensions.
Mhm.
Is that something that we could assign as a little bit of homework to each of us to take a stab at that?
Sure.
And then in the next meeting or, through, I don't know that we can do that through emails or whatever, probably not. But, perhaps send that response to you,
Or just bring it to the next
the
meeting.
next meeting.
Yeah,
Okay.
and-
Would that hold up anything if we wait
No, I
till the next
think
meeting?
we've got a lot of good comments to make
Okay.
version 2 out of what we have here and so I think we can produce version 2 and then have open areas here. We didn't have as much time to get this out to you ahead of time before the meeting, but we can do that if we have a couple weeks here before the next meeting.
I was gonna suggest if we don't mind talking about the next meeting, it would be nice to have one before the packet for the April PC meeting so that what we've talked about can be, maybe brought up at that point. And I know I'll be on vacation, so I have to do that packet I think, by the 22nd, so we would need to do it before, I don't know, what are. I don't know what I did with that.
You're proposing another physical meeting of the group yet this month?
Yeah.
Sure. Mhm. I'm game.
I mean, I could do another Friday, I think. No, let me get my phone. Well, next Friday is St. Patty's Day, so. No. I miss those days, though, I'm not gonna lie. Dude, I was downtown. Yeah. I was all garbed up.
Meeting, we're still.
Okay, it's true.
Yeah.
We could do 9 to 11 again.
Yeah,
I
okay.
mean, if everybody's available on next Friday.
On Friday, the
17th.
17th.
I'm good.
Are you?
At what time?
Well, I'm thinking the same as we did this time, 9 to 11.
Yeah, I could do 9 to 10.
Well,
30,
maybe we do
9
9 to 10 and see if
well,
we can.
or 9, it depends on what else you want to discuss, as long as we're here.
Well, that's true. We still have time today, so we could see if there's anything else we need to do or assign homework for ourselves or anything else that we can prep, and then maybe we can, an hour will be maybe plenty.
Well, we still need to talk about the mechanics of the survey and the options of what's available for that. Is it posted on the website? Is it mailed? Is it newsletter? Is it, what are we doing? Because
Is,
that,
is there, Tom had a suggestion, I'm gonna find it. There was criticism of using a non-local firm to administer and tally the 2009 survey results. We should look at local firms who could do the job. Is that within our budget? Or no, or do we know, or we are having to do this ourselves? Do we know that answer? I guess would be the first.
I don't know that answer.
Poker face back there. Okay. So maybe we start small, at least within us, and see what our parameters are, and we can. Maybe that's one of our research things, is to find out what that would cost.
Right. That's a good idea.
Or if there's a community member that does know how to use Excel and can enter all the data in, like, I think.
Well, there's a tool called Survey Monkey, which is
Yeah.
uh,
I mean, they
very
do all that.
easy to use. It's very, it doesn't cost much. It's like $20 a month or whatever. I think the last time I checked.
Yeah, that's a lot cheaper.
Yeah. Survey Monkey is pretty easy, and it collects the data and graphs it and
It
everything. for
tabulates
you.
it and
Yeah.
produces a report.
That sounds like a great option.
It is. It is.
What
But
I
that's-
would caution ourselves is being too willing to take on some of the data collapsing and sorting and all of that, because that tends to become a very monotonous, drag out kind of effort. This project just seems so important, and it can be overwhelming at any stage. I'm almost of the opinion, and I'm gonna sit on the fence for a while, but if there are services that can aggregate data and sort it and do that efficiently, rather than us learning tools and all, maybe that is a strategy, but I worry about when you have just one person or two people who are carrying the critical load and trying to meet deadlines. I'm just hopeful we can find that money.
Yeah, and Survey Monkey does have additional services
Mhm.
to help you write questions. You can provide them, but if they look at, it and go, oh, there's a little bias in here, or, maybe this could be phrased a little bit differently, um, you can pay for that. And it's not so much to me as, cost is important, but right now the more important cost is time. And
Yes.
I'd rather get it done as quickly as possible and get started. So this summer, or maybe even before school gets out, have something at one of the schools or.
I received a survey, I think it was from the county, and it had a code for me to use. So I couldn't enter multiple times. I don't know what program that was. I didn't keep the pamphlet on it, but each person had their own code. So you couldn't, it still kept me anonymous, but it made sure I wasn't, answering
Right.
online 5 times.
Mhm.
Um,
So that's homework to do, I think, between now and the next meeting to see that. I'm not sure if that's available in Survey Monkey or not.
I don't
Um,
know. It was not SurveyMonkey that this was through.
yeah, but I've seen that before too, where you just inform people or mail people a postcard with a code on it. And then they just go online, enter the code, and then the it's very tedious to tabulate paper surveys that come back. I mean, that's a very big job and difficult.
Prone to error too, right?
It is, yeah, it can be.
Why don't we do that? Does somebody want to take that on as a research project to research our online options and local? Not it.
I have, but I would have to redo it. I did check with some survey options. I looked at Grand Traverse County with the ARPA survey and who they used and things like that. Unfortunately, I am planning for something else that happens by the end of the month. And I can kind of redo what Grand Traverse County is and Survey Monkey and just give everyone the information to read through. I mean, I can do that, but it's going to be limited. Maybe somebody else could pick up where I stopped.
So I'll do some of that too and give you what I've known, worked on.
I could also look at a couple of the townships and see what they have decided. Some of them have already been through this
Mhm.
phase and determine the magnitude of the work, and then we can come back and talk
Yep.
about that
Yeah.
as well.
That would be great because I think we have 7 units, 5 or 7 units around us that we could kind of peek at.
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
So we've got a week, so you don't have to necessarily send it to us or have it to us before then. Would you want to be able to bring it to the meeting? Any research next that we come up with and we can share as a group?
I would prefer to email it to you as I have it in case for some I cannot predict the future. So
Right,
if I have something, I want to send it to you in case
that works.
my future may hold something I don't know yet.
Yeah, it's true.
So,
Okay. That works.
And I'll get an updated version of the survey out early next week.
Okay, and then anybody who cannot make it, Tom, if you're still unavailable next week, I believe you were until April. You could do the same thing. Email me your thoughts and I can share them through the meeting like I did today so that your voice is still heard. And of course, you can speak up at public comment as well if you want. Was there anything else we should cover today?
I think so.
I don't know if you were speaking to the other committee member just now.
Well, I was,
Mr.
yeah, kind of, but
I
we have
wonder-
to just still do public comment and
Yeah.
close, but
I'm just wondering if during public comment, you can ask him if he would like to volunteer for any of the tasks we've just mentioned.
oh. So yeah, if you want to volunteer, Tom, for anything, let us know. Thank you. I think if that's it for our agenda, and we got our next meeting next Friday at 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Then we'll go back to public comments. Yes, Lois is.
Hey, everybody, it's Vicky. I'm driving, so I can't raise my hand. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I'll be able to attend next week and I will try to work on some of that as well.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the town hall for Lois.
Thank you.
Yeah,
The question 8 maybe could have a question 9 added, or you have an 8A and an 8B. Because that one says north of M72, 1 acre. How about something like south of M72 is 5 acre minimum lot size, except around Island Lake. Is the 5 acre minimum appropriate? That can I? Anyway, big box. What is big box? How big is big box? Is big box as big as Walmart, or is it as small as Dollar General? Or is anything bigger than the Intuit building over there on Old M72 considered big box? That one to me is kind of rough. And the building theme idea, you drive into Traverse City now and almost everything is big square buildings. That's just the way that buildings are. You go into Lansing and they're all that same kind of thing up close to the roads. But to me, that's a theme. And I don't know if the city has forced that or if that's just the way that the construction company is now, or all those people that are doing the design. But I know that before this last master plan, when it exploded, was I believe in 2008, when one of the things that they were talking about was telling people that they had to be off M72, so many hundreds of feet back, and that it needed to have certain types of materials used. They wanted like natural wood, and everything was going to have stone or brick along with the wood, and specific colors that were neutral tone. And I'll tell you, that went, that was a huge negative. I think that you want to be real careful with your presentation of a theme, because that could, you know, to me, those are themes. And yes, it's beautiful, but we're Whitewater Township. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom.
Yes, thanks for adding my comments that I had made. I had thrown out a number of stakeholders like businesses and churches and schools and so on, and I certainly didn't expect or anticipate that separate surveys would be created for those groups, but perhaps specifically with businesses, that you might go out of your way to involve businesses and invite them to a specific business-related workshop to get their point of view. Pros and cons of surveys have been discussed, but I feel that I wouldn't want to underemphasize the benefit. I know we all get survey weary, but for many people, it may be the preferred method for giving information, primarily because it requires less time. Drawing people who are interested enough to come to a workshop certainly is not a random selection of citizens either. And finally, when you were talking about rural themed buildings, I thought maybe to get away from the word rural, country themed buildings might make sense, but as Lois just indicated, I'm not at all sure that Whitewater Township is willing to control building design. And I will attempt to be there for the next meeting. If you could send me information like the updated list that we worked on today by email, I would appreciate that in anticipation of the meeting.
Sure, yeah.
And
Anything else?
that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vern?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. First of all, Randy, I think the questions that you provided are absolutely outstanding. And Rachel, I appreciate the way that you've kind of left this, are managing the meeting and leaving it open for discussion on that, because I think the dialogue that happened today was absolutely outstanding. I am impressed with the way you guys are very sensitive to leading questions, because that's always been a problem with surveys, I think, especially in the corporate world that I've been in. And also making sure that you're not, biased in any of the questions. I did want to comment on two things. So one was, there were talk about a quadrant. And I think that's a good idea to do that, to kind of understand where the people are coming from and where their sensitivities are. And I also know you guys said that putting a map on the survey might just kind of clutter things up, but I think it's really important, because you talked about, different zoning districts and the quadrants. And if you had a quadrant that a small little map that said, do you live in 1, 2, 3, or 4? Some people have a hard time with north, south, east, and west. Just something to think about there a little bit too. The other thing is I also know that from surveys, providing people with education beforehand or somehow during the survey is very important also. And the reason I kind of say that a little bit is, and I mean, this is my bias here a little bit, is I live south of 72, and I live in a district that's called the RC district. And it's always been referenced by people in the planning commission as the recreation district. And about 2 years ago, I asked somebody at the planning commission outside, I said, do you know what RC stands for? And they said, well, yeah, residential and commercial. And I was shocked, because RC stands for recreation and conservation. And those two words are very important. And so I don't know if there's a way to kind of educate people on what is a commercial, what is the RC, what is the residential, what is industrial, what is agricultural a little bit. I know it gets clustered. You're going to just fill up one page with a map and all of this stuff. But to me, that's always been very important, especially in the corporate world. When people put out surveys, it's I can get any answer I want just by leading the questions and providing the information that I want people to know about. But I think today's meeting was outstanding. I'm very impressed with what you guys are doing, Rachel and Randy and everybody there. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Connie?
Good morning, everyone. I agree with Vern. The meeting was very well run, and the people that are giving of their time and efforts, I applaud all of you. I think it's so important that you have this survey so that people can voice their concerns and their wants for the community. Of course, in the PC meetings and the board meetings, we can see that there's a lot of growth happening in our township, and including on my own land, hopefully someday. But, as I just received a survey for the town that I live in downstate, if I don't understand something or a question in the survey, going to the dictionary or Google to define rural, or to define big box, or to define anything that is confusing to me is always, I think, a go-to for most people. So I appreciate that you're trying to get the wording so that it is specific. I think that it's important that the survey is understandable by most and all people of the township. So I am looking forward to the survey and to answering the questions there. So good job, everyone. Excellent. Loved it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's, I believe, it for public comment. Any discussion? Go ahead.
I would like to thank everyone on Zoom for your comments and participating in the meetings that you do. I know you're not just on the master plan subcommittee meetings, so thank you for participating. The other comment is that I realize that a lot of people in Whitewater Township do not have internet access. So technically, they couldn't go online and look up the terminology that we're using. But the township's working on that. So we do have to do something by mail. That's just the way we reach people here.
Anything else?
Nope.
Okay, I'm gonna close the meeting at 10:56. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.